for questions.
Always tricky there. I thank the chairman and I thank the chairwoman and the ranking member for being here today and to discuss obviously a very important topic. I, like many of the committee members, am a parent. I think, as many of you know, have a 4-year-old daughter, and my wife and I are expecting our second child in May. So this is a subject that's very close to my heart, as I suspect it is to many others. I listened to the tail end of my friend Mr. Massie's comments regarding his bill, which I hoped we would discuss today, regarding his proposal to eliminate the Department of Education. And I guess what I would say is I'm a bit confused by some of the dialogue that the gentleman had with the chairwoman. And the reason is, I mean, I'm a passionate supporter of parental engagement and ensuring that parents have the ability, obviously, to be able to guide their children's education. But I have often heard my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and in reviewing some of the statements made by the chairwoman in the past, of their fears regarding federal involvement in education at the local level. And it seems to me like this bill is strengthening the role of the U.S. Department of Education as it relates to the way in which local school districts back in our respective states are governed, not weakening it. Am I wrong there, Madam Chair, or am I reading that wrong?
The title of the bill is the Parents' Bill of Rights.
Sure.
Just read the title of the bill, and that tells you what we are trying to do. No, we are not trying to strengthen the Department of Education. We are trying to strengthen the role of parents in their ability to understand what's being taught in the schools, where the money that they're paying into the schools is going. So no, the title of the bill is the Parents' Bill of Rights, not how can we strengthen the U.S. Department of Education.
It's interesting you say that, Madam Chair, because as I read this bill, I'm looking at page 27. This is subparagraph H on enforcement and reporting. Perhaps this section has come up previously. Subparagraph C, subparagraph 1. I'll quote, enforcement. The Secretary shall take such action as the Secretary determines appropriate to enforce this section, except that action to terminate assistance provided under an applicable program shall be taken only if the Secretary determines and then lists a number of conditions. So to me, that sounds like you are saying that the Secretary of Education can take whatever action they determine appropriate to be able to enforce the various provisions of this legislation. Am I reading that provision wrong?
That's current law.
This is current, but you're not trying to change it, I guess is what my point. You're saying that in order to enforce this section, these new regulations and rules that you have either are putting in statute or are asking the Secretary of Education to promulgate, that the Secretary will have power to enforce those. Does that mean that the Secretary could, deprive funding for a local school district, tell a school board what to do, shut down? I mean,
You and I have two different pages of 27. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the rules print, because I can't find exactly where you are on page 27. I'm on the...
Sure, my apologies if I give you the wrong page number here. I'll make sure we're working off the right.
It's page 20, half page 26.
Oh, it's page 26.
Half page 26.
Page 26?
It is current law. We're adding how the transparency occurs under the existing law.
So I guess what
So we're just adding paragraphs.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand how promulgating a new set of requirements and rules that every school district in the United States of America will have to comply with, and enabling the Secretary of Education, whom many of your colleagues, perhaps you bemoan and would like to see eliminated in terms of the role of the Department of Education, giving that secretary unfettered ability to enforce these provisions. How is that not giving the Secretary of Education more power?
Well, it's confined to the very little piece that we're talking about. You're saying giving him unfettered control? I don't think so.
The Secretary shall take action as the Secretary determines appropriate to enforce this section. The only limitation is if he decides that he believes that assistance should be terminated to a particular school district, then the Secretary needs to comply with the various conditions that you've outlined in this statute.
Yeah, it's, again, it's the current law there, and then we add under that the reporting. Each agency that receives funds shall, without identifying any personal information. This is where we get into the issue of safety of children.
Yeah.
So,
I guess what I'm saying, Madam Chair, is
it's pretty well described how we tell this, how the Secretary is told to do this.
I agree. I don't think there's any ambiguity at all as to the Secretary's role. I think it's fairly clear in existing law and in the statute you propose. I'm simply suggesting that in the past, and perhaps the ranking member would care to comment on this or opine on it, the debate within your distinguished committee has been that the Secretary of Education should have less authority, not more. That any opportunity at which a Democratic member has proposed perhaps a new program or a new set of requirements that the Secretary of Education ought to be able to enforce nationwide, the argument, the retort that we've often heard from the other side of the aisle is that the federal government should have no role in enforcing any rules, any regulations as it relates to local school districts. And now it seems to me that you're making the opposite argument. Is that, Mr. Massie?
Yeah, thank you for yielding. I'm glad you distinguished the difference between less authority and no authority, because I would give them no authority, because I see nowhere in the Constitution are they authorized. And you make a great point, but I think what we're talking about is...
I'll go ahead and reclaim my time at that juncture, if that's appreciated. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
You want to stop right
Yeah, no, go ahead, Mr.
Right,
Massie.
and strike all the words before it. But, no, I think, what I hear here in this bill is it doesn't give any new enforcement authority. What we're discussing here is what they're going to enforce. And if you're asking me to be intellectually and ideologically consistent, I will be. I would eliminate this department. I was in the 4th grade before it existed and did just fine.
And as you know, Mr. Massie, and I appreciate the colloquy, and I always appreciate your candor. And if anything, I'm only, I suppose, begging of my other colleagues to apply that same intellectual honesty with respect to the current bill that's before us. So
don't worry.
Perhaps Mr. Roy will get to that. I want to yield a moment to the ranking member.
Thank you. Well, part of the problem is you're trying to enforce, there's nothing in here that isn't already going on. They have the right to see documents. Well, they got freedom of information to get documents already. Opportunity to be heard. That's no real power, because what you end up with is the most loudest vocal minority getting their way, and that's how you get slavery is wrong being banned from classrooms.
I mean, that's a great point, ranking member, and maybe perhaps, Madam Chair, you might be able to add something on this front. So I take it you would describe the rights that you are attempting, that you propose to codify in this legislation as vitally important. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. And with all due respect, Mr. Neguse, I do think you're off on what you're saying about what's in the enforcement section and what we have added in terms of the privacy information.
I hear you.
I think you're not interpreting it correctly.
Well, I think the colloquy between me and Mr. Massie, I mean, it seemed like, I don't want to speak for Mr. Massie, but he agreed with my interpretation of it as well. I'm not saying ideologically, but in any event, we'll move past that. I guess the point the question I'm asking now really relates to some of the rights that you have put within this bill, or that you specified or described, right? So an example would be the right to information about any plans to eliminate gifted and talented programs in the child's school, right? That's an important right. I assume you'd agree.
Well, you're suggesting you don't already have it.
Well, no, I'm asking, Madam Chair, if that's an important right.
Absolutely.
And the right-
Parents should know
I
what
agree.
is being, because if it's going to affect their child.
Yes, Madam Chair, I
they
agree
need
with
to
you.
know.
And I agree with you.
Okay.
That's just what I'm saying. It's not a trick question. The right to review any professional development materials. I think that's a really important right, too. I assume you agree.
Agree.
Okay, so here's my question. What county is I know you have multiple districts, multiple counties within your congressional district. What's the largest county in your congressional district?
The largest county in my
Yes,
district?
yes, ma'am.
I assume it's Forsyth County Forsyth County is the largest county.
And I have not had the pleasure of visiting Forsyth County. Is that county, does it have a particular school district in that county, or does it extend beyond?
No, it's one county system.
It's one county system. Does that county system provide that school district with parents the right to information, this subparagraph I, about any plans to eliminate gifted and talented programs in the child's school?
You know, I've not read the policy of the Forsyth County Schools.
Of the largest school district in your district?
Well, I haven't read their policy manual, and I don't think it's typical that a member would read the policy manuals of every one of their school boards. Maybe the ranking member's done that, but frankly, I haven't had a chance to do that. I was on a school board for 12 years, and I helped write the first policy manual that the school board put in place. But I haven't read the policy manual for Forsyth County.
I would just suggest, because I think it underscores the larger debate that we're having about local control and the role of the federal government, that the best place to start, because I agree with you, these are really important, vital rights that every parent in the country ought to have. And hold on, if I may, Madam Chair, and I would think the best place to start would be with your local school board, would be to ask the local school board and make sure that the right to review, for example, any professional development materials is secured. And it just strikes me as odd, if that right is as important as you and I both agree it is, that the largest school district in your district, that at least as of right now, we're unclear as to whether or not that right is something that school district has. So I don't, if the ranking member would care to make a final comment on
That's the point. I can't imagine, and you have a right to address the school board. How many school boards do you know where you don't routinely have the right, within reason, to address the school board? Now, if you want to make a 20-minute presentation at every meeting, they may limit your right to speak. But, I mean, you list it as a right. That's what the Cato Institute said, even if it were constitutional, and they don't believe it is, it would not give parents any real power. They just list things that are nice that are already going on. And once you have the right to see the documents, then what? The vocal minority gets to decide what's taught.
Well, I thank the ranking member. I thank the chairwoman. Again, I thank both members here today for their testimony and for the conversation, the discussion. To the
Mr.
extent that my
Chairman,
coll-
if I might add a comment here.
Sure.
Again, it's not a matter of what the school districts in my district have in their policy manual. It's a matter of all parents in this country having the right. Again, I've not read the policy manual. I think, frankly, that our school systems in the 5th District of North Carolina do a pretty good job of engaging parents and parents being engaged in the schools. So I really don't have much of an argument, but I do know, and I can give some examples of places in this country where parents are not allowed to speak at school board meetings, where parents have been arrested for speaking at school board meetings, for exercising their constitutional rights to petition their government, which are already in the Constitution, in the First Amendment. So what we're trying to do is make it really, really clear to the American public that parents have rights when it comes to their children's education.
And Madam Chair,
I think that's very important.
And Madam Chair, I would simply say that, and I don't want to get an extended debate with you on this topic, but I would just to reiterate what I had mentioned before, the point of me raising your particular school district is my sense that, again, in a country that very much values, prizes local control, and I know my colleagues and Mr. Roy and others, I don't want to speak for him, but I suspect will touch on this, certainly agree that a good place to start as we debate the codification within this potential proposed piece of legislation around various rights that a parent would have vis-a-vis their school district would be in our local communities to check to see, what's been promulgated and regulated at the local level, and then follow that and emulate that. So to the extent that it's working effectively and is broadly based. So in any event.
But just very briefly.
Sure, Ranking Member.
There's a provision in the bill that says that if you're exercising your right to speak, you should not be criminalized. And an amendment was accepted to point out, but if there's a credible threat of violence, then of course, public safety officials should be called. And that amendment was adopted.
So in any event, I would just again say I agree with the various rights that were in that we were sort of going back through with me and the chairwoman, and I appreciate the debate today. But I would hope that we also would bring some sense of our local communities to this discussion, and that's the reasoning for my exchange. With that, I yield back to the chair.
Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank both of you for appearing today. I'm not going to belabor this.